Hey guys, Technomentary here with the video for you guys. In today's video, we're going to talk about the iPhone XS Max going into 2023. If it's still worth it to use it, if it's worth buying it, and finally, if it's worth upgrading from. So let's talk about the iPhone XS Max here. So the iPhone XS Max was released back in September of 2018. Now, it's been a little over 4 years, and that seems like a long time for the iPhone, but in fact, this phone holds up really well. That it's one of the favorite phones that most people still have and use and haven't upgraded from, if you haven't noticed here. And that's because it has a lot of great features. Of course, some of the newer features it might be missing, but you'll find that this phone, again, holds up really well in even going into 2023 and probably will hold up pretty well. But let's talk about some things about here. As we mentioned here, it's a nice, beautiful 6.5-inch display here. This is an OLED display here. You do have the top notch, which the newer phones start to go with all that dynamic island, but that doesn't really matter too much for it. You'll notice here the slick design on the phone here. You got these rounded edges, which Apple moved away from starting with the iPhone 12 line up here. Again, on the back here, you got that nice crisp design. You got the Apple logo with the word iPhone. You got two 12-megapixel camera here on a lighter form. Of course, the newer Pro lineup now has 3 cameras, but these two 12-megapixel camera, again, takes some really great picture and video, which we'll talk about in a moment here. You got the SIM card tray, which is no longer available on the US model on the iPhone 14 lineup, as we noticed, and these nice speakers on the bottom here. Again, some quality sounds that you get out of it. So here I have the silver color, but you can also get it in gold and space gray as well here. And lastly, when it comes to hardware, it is packed with that A12 Bionic chip with 4 gigs of RAM, which again gives a lot of power for a phone, for even a 4-year-old phone. And of course, when it comes to things like storage here, you do start with a little bit on the lower end, 64 gig on the base model, but you can get it upgraded to 512 gig, which again finds to be a really good for even some of the heavier user. Of course, nowadays iPhone, you can go all the way up to 1 terabyte on the new 14 Pro Max lineup. But again, that shouldn't stop anyone from upgrading from even or using the iPhone XS Max going into 2023. Also about this phone is the battery. It's a bigger size battery because it is a bigger phone. They're able to pack a bigger size battery. We see a 3179 mAh battery on this here, which gives you about 15 hours of video playback, which again is pretty good for this phone, considering that it's a 4-year-old phone. At the time, it seems great. Nowadays, you go up to closer to the mid to late 29 hours, but again, 15 hours still is pretty good for this phone when it was released, if you think about that. Now let's talk about the other aspect, is the camera here. You might be wondering, how well does the camera hold up? Well, now if you look at the camera, if you're taking photos and even portrait mode stuff, you get a lot of these features that make your photography pretty good here. Even when it comes to video recording, we can record from HD all the way to 4K and 60 frames per second. Again, great for those two 12-megapixel camera. The front camera, again, has the 7-megapixel camera. Now, newer phones have up to 12-megapixel camera. Again, that might be not a big difference for you, but it still takes some great selfie here. Of course, other feature that it's lacking is probably the cinematic mode and Apple ProRAW, which again started to be available on the iPhone 13 and above, which again, this one just didn't make the cut here for that technology. Of course, other things like night mode enhanced, you don't have those minor upgrades that camera Apple does for each model. Again, you're just not going to get those upgrades because at the time those weren't available for the iPhone lineup here. Now let's talk about the next thing, which is the software of the phone. Now, for your phone, it got a couple major software update for it. We were able to update to the latest iOS 16 version, which we did a review video for you guys if you guys want to check it out if you haven't updated. The good thing about the iPhone XS Max here, it does get the 16 update, and you can pretty much take all of the newer features that you get on a new phone with this 16 update, because the software update is what gives you all of those fancy features that you like. As you can see here, we reviewed in the other videos as well, so you get all of that for it. Now, just taking it back to the most basic stuff, which is your calling and texting. So this phone will get you those things done without any issues, and we see some really great speakers and microphones. So even when it comes to texting and stuff, you notice this phone again will pretty much be able to do things like iMessage and your regular texting without any issues. And coming back to the software of it, in terms of performance here, the performance, you probably won't notice much of a difference comparing it to a new phone, and that's how well iOS 16 has been working for this phone here. So when you started to test out things like social media, even things like video streaming, music streaming, all of that seems to well for us, even for things like just using your regular day-to-day app for shopping, productivity, work, school, all of that. You'll notice here again excels with this phone, and because it's a bigger size phone, it's beautiful in the terms of doing a lot of that. When you're multitasking between different apps, you can just simply open it up and get started here. You'll notice here maybe a second or two delay compared to the newer phones, but again, that won't really make much of a sense for a regular user when it comes to even things like light gaming to heavier gaming. We tested some of the games, works pretty well still. Now, the one thing we will say about this phone is the refresh rate is only for the screen is about 60 hertz compared to the newer 120 hertz, which is double when it comes to, if you really care about those frames per second. Again, you might not. That is something to mention here. So now let's really talk about why the iPhone XS Max is a great choice or still worth it in 2023. Well, one thing is it's on a supported updated iOS version here. If you're not looking for anything too much to the latest version but still have this phone and you're still using it, and it's not a bad phone to use, but the sweet spot for someone looking for a new phone, why the iPhone XS Max might be a great choice, is the price point that you can get it in. Originally, this phone started at the $1,000 price mark in the USD market. Now it has dropped all the way to around $300 or so, and you can't buy it directly from Apple because Apple no longer produces the phone, but you can buy it in pre-owned from sites like Amazon and eBay, which will leave the link in the description section. We bought used phones from eBay and Amazon and tend to be really good phones overall. Of course, you have return policy and things like that, but you can score this phone around $300 or so, almost 1/3 the price, to get most of the features that you get on a new 14 Pro Max lineup. Now, a couple of things it does lack here that we'll say is that there is no 5G support for the iPhone XS Max, which again, it's kind of a new update just past this iPhone 12 is when the 5G was released for it. But one of the other things about this phone that you probably might want to consider is if you're thinking about the battery life, if you want that like all day battery, you might be looking at a newer phone because 15 hours is good, but today's standards, most people want something with like at least 20 hours or more. Again, not a big deal breaker, but there's something we do want to mention here. And the other thing to mention is the base storage starts at 64 gig and up to 512 gig. So if you're looking to get 1 terabyte, you might be looking at something newer as well, like the iPhone 13 and above lineup here. But nonetheless, this shouldn't take away for the fact that it is a great device going into 2023. It's definitely worth it, and it will be worth it for at least another 2 to 3 years, no doubt about it. So that's our thought on the iPhone XS Max. We want to hear from you guys. What's your thought on the iPhone XS Max? Do you guys like it? Are you guys using it? Are you currently using it? Or have you upgraded from it or thinking about upgrading? Leave a comment in the comment section while you're at it. Really appreciate hitting that like and subscribe button at the same time. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll catch you in the next video. See you guys next time.